This is TWiT.
All right, Flo, what you got?
What have I got? I've got this thing. The wing. Oh my goodness. It's quite bright for the show right now. So I'm actually realizing that I'm probably going to have to turn down the brightness.
Have you taken off with the wing?
I have not. I have not.
Is that a dad joke, Jason?
Yeah, I think that qualifies. We were talking about dad jokes earlier before the show, and I was questioning whether Ron actually cracks them. And when he does, is he proud of them?
I would say yes,
and
yes. yes. So.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, I was flying. I just want to give you guys a closer look at the LG Wing for those who are watching the video feed. As you can see,
that is just a funky looking
Maybe
device.
You can see this. There's just like this pattern on the back, but the screen itself that's on the front, it feels kind of flimsy. I want to get into that a little bit more. But first, I would love to switch cameras if you'll allow me so that I can give you a little more of a show and tell while I walk you through this.
So for those who are tuning in this week, last week, Flo unboxed the LG Wing. And we're all very excited to see it because it is a phone that I have been hotly anticipating because it is a bananas design. And so she unboxed it and she's had a week to play with it. And we're really looking forward to hearing what she thinks of it, whether or not the bananas design is functional in a way that we just haven't realized yet. And LG is ahead of their time and this is the new future of phones. Or is it a gimmick that will be shut down in a year and a half or less than?
So I'm going to do my best to try and do a slight show and tell. At least I will keep the camera on the phone while I tell you about this very special phone. So I will tell you something. The LG Wing, it certainly is something. It's certainly something different, but I don't mean in the way that you would think a folding phone is different. A folding phone has some familiarity to it. You expand it out. It works like a tablet. You have that instinct to use it like a tablet. The LG Wing, it's got this T-shape, which is cool. And as you can see, it looks very cool when it has a wallpaper on it. You can sort of set up the software to cut up the wallpaper. It looks good from far away, but it is a little confusing when you actually get into it and start to use it. And actually, I'm going to show you this funny thing right here. This is how you use the fingerprint sensor when it's in what's called swivel mode. So it still stays there on the side, obviously, because it's in the screen. So it's not moving places. But I can't tell you how many times I instinctually tried to unlock the phone in this mode with the fingerprint sensor down on the secondary screen. It's just little things like this that remind me that you have to think about this phone in a different way when you're using it. So this is a dual screen device, but you're getting a little less screen than you would with an LG Velvet or the V60 with their second screen accessory. The main screen here on top is a 6.8-inch OLED display, and then the secondary is 3.9 inches. There have been some reports of slightly different coloring between the two that apparently some people have noticed, but I haven't really noticed with whatever I've been using. But that's just something to take into consideration. Now, you can take advantage of this setup with apps, I should say, with the apps that work in landscape mode. So up here it has its own, on the main display, I guess, it has its own little, what's that called? Spotlight carousel that they have, they had in iTunes. I think it's called Spotlight. And so you can kind of pin different apps that you like to use in landscape mode. And I had to go into the settings and set it up so that I could have an app drawer on this screen when it's in swivel mode, which is what this is called. It was really confusing to know what apps I could use and when. So I just kind of dove in and started to launch things. I noticed that the best way to use the phone in this T-shaped swivel mode is to use the top part as the main screen, which can be kind of hard to do when you're cradling it. I'm not cradling it on the camera right now because of the way my camera is set up, but just trust me that it's a little weird. I'm going to do this upside down.
Is it just because that bottom display is so squatty and kind of
the bottom display is so squatty. The way I'm holding it now, remember I grew up in the era of the T-Mobile Sidekick and other sort of QWERTY phones that came out at the time with full-blown keyboards. And so thank you, Burke, for changing around the
there you go.
the video.
Perfect.
And so I grew up kind of with this mechanism of having my two thumbs, you know, using that to type, using that to scroll along. You can kind of do that with this bottom screen. There's an LG Touch. It turns the bottom screen into a trackpad. And then you have an arrow in the main primary top screen.
Okay.
So that's fun.
It's amazing.
That's fun
it's
to
amazing.
do. Look at that. I can even, it's wild and silly. I don't know that I like it that way. I do think it's kind of cool when you do stuff like launch Google TV at the top and then, you're like going, into your main app that's kind of helping you watch something on the top. And then on the bottom, I don't know. I'm going to go to the Google app, and I'm going to look up the people that I'm, that are in the TV shows and movies that I'm scrolling through. So those are kind of the fantasy idea of how you would use this phone. But then when it comes to like real life usage of this phone, it's a little more complicated than that. There are apps that I'm not going to launch into just because of like privacy. Instagram, for instance, I wanted to go into it and use the gimbal mode. That's the other thing that LG was really pushing with this phone is, it does all of this like cool camera stuff. All right, so you can go and you can do this gimbal mode. The bottom of the screen turns into sort of like this control panel for the camera. I will get into the cameras in just a bit, but for now, the gimbal mode, there's 3 different point of views that you can launch into. So there's first person view mode. So that's really good if you're like getting into somebody's face. Like I was using that when I was filming my daughter. Or you can get into pan follow mode. I was using that when I was kind of panning along like my keyboards. It, follows along with where the phone is going. I thought it was pretty intuitive. And then there's follow mode, which I'm still kind of figuring out what that's for. And because I'm not a videographer, I don't quite know, but I will say that this helpful little, what would you call this? A compass,
like an eyeball
of
or
sorts?
something?
Yeah, there's a helpful little compass eyeball of sorts that kind of lets you know where your levels are at as you're holding the device. It takes really nice video, and I'll actually show off some video in just a little bit for the video watchers. But what I didn't like is that this is all you can do in this camera app. You can only use these few modes. So there's a dual recording mode that is,
front and back.
Make your own little MTV moment. Cool. There's also like picture in picture if you wanted to do that. Again, I feel like this would be mostly useful for just social media purposes. There's time lapse. So theoretically, you could put this in a smartphone camera tripod of sorts. I found this bottom part to actually be pretty stable inside of one of those like springy camera mounts. I still don't really feel super comfortable putting it in the mount in the car though. So that's just kind of something to pay attention to. And I'll tell you something else later too. So that was the idea behind this time-lapse mode. And then there's a slow-mo mode. So some helpful video modes, but this is all you can do in the camera app in this mode. You can take photos with this little shutter button in the bottom right corner of the camera app, but the photos that come out in this mode are, I think because it's defaulting to the ultra wide lenses, because that's what it uses for the gimbal mode. It's getting the resolution from those cameras instead of the main camera, which I think we can talk about now, Burke, if you wanted to go ahead and just launch into that the little Google Drive that I gave you. So here we have a 78-degree 64 megapixel camera with optical image stabilization, and then 2 ultra-wide cameras, a 117-degree 13 megapixel and a 120-degree 12 megapixel. Those 2 ultra-wide cameras that kind of piggyback off of each other to really help with the gimbal mode. And again, I liked the gimbal mode, but it wasn't... Beyond that, I didn't find much use for it. And the photos that this phone takes are great, but you can only take them in regular phone mode. Not even inside a third-party app can you use the gimbal mode. So I would go into Instagram, for instance. There's no landscape mode there, and I would have to immediately flip the phone back into regular mode just so that I can go back to scrolling through Instagram. I was really bummed about that because there's this mechanism that comes up. Let's say you're inside, I don't know, anywhere there's a text box. So I'm just going to go ahead and, oh, I forgot I switched keyboard apps. I'm sorry. This is ruining the demo. Arg. Sorry, guys. Now I'm tripped up over this. Someone...
Was it a keyboard on the bottom, or what did it show?
Yeah, it's a keyboard on the bottom, but it's only in the LG keyboard app. And
yeah.
I'm so sorry about that, guys.
And I had heard that keyboard wasn't that great to begin with.
That's my whole thing about this phone. Not my whole thing, but whatever. But like and that's why I've asked developers about this and stuff like that. Is that how is LG making this work with the OS? And we talked about this last week. At what point is it worthwhile for other developers to accommodate this kind of wacky approach? I would just worry that a lot of this stuff really only works best when it's optimized for this type of display. And I got to imagine that LG and their native apps are the only ones that are actually doing that, right?
Yeah, there is this weird sort of... It's not weird, I should say. They try and help you out to get usage out of this phone by letting you sort of tag team 2 apps at a time. One that I really like to use was the one that I mentioned, the Google TV with the Google on the bottom. I tried to do something silly. I tried to do Android Auto and Google Maps at the same time just because they were showing off that driving mode. But it will not let you do 2 instances of maps at the same time, which makes sense. Yeah. But then again, this whole mounting situation, it just feels like such a very special use case. And for the most part, like I would go inside apps and I would just feel really frustrated that I couldn't use the second screen to at least type a little more comfortably. Like not even an Instagram where I was hoping to like answer some messages and I couldn't use the LG keyboard to do that. So there's a lot of quirks about it that kind of negate the other things it has going for it. Like it's got a Snapdragon 765G. So this is a 5G capable phone. As I mentioned, it has really great cameras on the back. It's got these 3 lenses that work really well in tandem, but again, you can see how many fingerprints. This is just from me handling it here on video.
I have heard it is thirsty for fingerprints. Yeah.
And also, guys, it's kind of a hefty phone. It's kind of hefty when it's just used on its own. It makes it very hard to wield it one-handed without being in that swivel mode. I also found the software to be really limited in what I could customize between the swivel mode and the regular mode. And so it's like, why do I have this capability if I don't really have much control over it? I don't really have use for it in other third-party apps. So this is just kind of something to think about with this particular device. Oh, there is that pop-up camera, which we were talking about last week, but because the phone wasn't on.
Oh, there it is.
It's very loud. Let me get close to the mic, see if you can hear it. Let's see. Did you hear that at all?
Oh, yeah.
You did?
Yeah, it's a B sharp, or no, I don't know.
Oh, you didn't hear it? Okay, that's about
No, we heard it.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah, there's just little quirks about this phone that doesn't make it seem like a over $1,000 device.
Yeah.
I'm still sort of struggling to understand who the demographic is for this, because I feel like if it's young kids, they're using what they have already. I don't think that they're going to go out and buy this phone just for this, the sheer idea of being a creative or something of the sort, or just because there's a gimbal mode, which, by the way, is not even a mechanical gimbal mode. Like I mentioned, it relies electronically on those ultra wide lenses to sort of stabilize itself. So there's a lot of first gen magic happening here, we should say.
Yeah, and it's important to also to point out that this was launched under LG's Explorer project, which is really kind of an experimental wing as it is, where they're kind of playing around with ideas. So, to kind of address your question as far as like who this is for and how many they're going to sell, I think at the end of the day, I'm not certain that LG released this with the thought that it's going to move millions and millions of these devices, but they are experimenting, which I totally applaud any smartphone company that does something different and experiments, and not only experiments, but puts it out in the market to see how it does. Because if they sell more than whatever I'm assuming is kind of like their modest targets, then maybe that encourages them to develop the idea further and address some of these things. And maybe there ends up being a wing too.
I'm right there with you, Jason. I don't think I don't think it's realistic to expect this to be the next sidekick or next, kind of paradigm changing phone type thing. But I like that when we said it last week when you unboxed it, I like that they're trying. I like that they're doing something different. Right now innovation in Android is purely just foldables, and that shouldn't be the case. And if this leads to some sort of, development that leads to another type of phone paradigm or another type of thing you could do with the technology, then great. This is how you iterate and you evolve with design. So I think LG should be applauded. It's ridiculous, but so was the modular phone that they tried, and so I love it. So please, LG, don't stop this discovery. I love it. So
they won't. I think my main frustration is that I see like a lot of innovation coming forward, but I really wish just someone take it a little further. I mean, they are taking it seriously, but maybe focus. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Just stop trying to go after the kids.
Well,
They've already chosen. I don't know. It just feels like make it more than just a phone for a special niche case, because that's what this feels like. It just feels. It feels like the last couple of LG launches have been very like focused around creators. We want to give things to creators. Like we want to give things to these people who really want to live out of the box. And like, I get it, but is that really helping? And is that what people really want?
All good questions.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. So then the like at the end of this segment, do you recommend in any way, or are you kind of like, yeah, maybe wait for a wing too, or you got to know that you're the person that would want to buy this? Like as a consumer, we already know whether this phone speaks to us or not. Like what's your recommendation there?
I have a pal who he loves LG phones, and he's always had an LG phone. And he asked me recently, like, which of the three that I would suggest of these. I think we're talking about the LG V60, the LG Velvet, and then this is the LG Wing. So of those three phones, which are available here in the US, I would suggest the V60 just because of its like overall, it's a great like run-of-the-mill phone with a great camera system. This also has a really great camera system, but this whole situation with the heft and with the fact that you can't really take photographs when you're in that T swivel mode, you can only do it like this. It's just kind of like, what are you paying for? You really have to want that swivelly sort of look and feel. Otherwise, the LG Velvet is, another great LG device, and I think that one's a little bit cheaper than the V60, and you can still get a second screen situation with those other two phones. So if the second screen is really what you want, just go for the extra case.
And worth pointing out that internally, from my understanding, this and the LG Velvet are very similar on the inside. Yes. So you truly are paying more for the swivel.
Yeah.
And the gimbal or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So Flo, up against the wall, Flo. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I'm gonna give it a thumb in the middle.
I knew it.
Is that okay? Because I think it's a necessary launch from LG's part, just for like the industry. We need to have this in the ether, but like for the consumer, for a person going out to buy a phone, there are two other perfectly fine LG phones already available. So